Hi, I'm Dr. Sri Banerjee, core faculty for the College of Health Sciences and Public Policy at Walnut University. And in this video, I will be going over Sustainable Development Goal number 12. And so for starters, I always like to look at the color, look at the insignia, and just orient myself with the goal. So the goal is responsible consumption and production. So looking at the main goals that are surrounding sustainable main targets that are surrounding Sustainable Development Goal number 12. Number 1 is implementing the 10-year Sustainable Consumption and Production Framework. So this is consumption of chemicals, consumption consumption of goods, raw goods, and then production of chemicals and waste. Goal number 2 looks at sustainable management and use of natural resources. Number 3, looking at halving global per capita food waste. There's so much food waste involved in not only fast food productions chains, but also just in many different, even supermarkets, has a lot of waste. Number 4 looks at responsible management of chemicals and waste. Number 5 is substantially reducing waste generation. Number 6, looking at encouraging companies to adopt sustainable practices and sustainability reporting. Promoting sustainable public procurement practices. And then finally, promoting universal understanding of sustainable lifestyles. So what are the means to achieve targets? Number 1, supporting developing countries' scientific and technological capacity for sustainable consumption and production. This is especially important because in order to have advancement, development, there is a need for scientific and technological advancement. Number 2, developing and implementing tools to monitor sustainable tourism. And then finally, removing market distortions that encourage wasteful consumption. So going into the just some visuals here and looking at an infographic about the Sustainable Development Goal. This starts to shed some light about what goal number 12 is all about. So the global material footprint increased by 70% between 2000 and 2017. So what does material footprint mean? Well, this translates to 1 million plastic drinking bottles, which were purchased every minute. So 1 million plastic drinking bottles were purchased every minute. And then 5 trillion single-use plastic bags are thrown away each year. This is staggering. These are remarkable and staggering numbers. And then developing countries, they still have a lot of vast untapped resources for renewable energy. So new renewable electricity capacity is there, and there's 880 watts per capita in developed countries, whereas 210 watts per capita in developing countries. So there's definitely a lot more renewable capacity in developed countries than developing countries for renewable resources, and it's important that we capitalize on that. So electronic waste continues to proliferate. It's not disposed responsibly, and each person actually generates about 7.3 kilos of e-waste. And this is according to 2019 statistics, but only 1.7 kilos were actually recycled. So a lot of this is just going to waste, and so this needs to be decreased as well. So despite progress with fossil fuel subsidies, uh, despite progress, fossil fuel subsidies continue to threaten the achievement of the Paris Agreement and 2030 agenda. So $432 billion in 2019 was spent towards subsidies, and that's a decline of 21% from 2018. So this is showing a decline in subsidies, and so we need to make progress so that we can ensure that all countries that have actually signed the Paris Agreement are in agreement with, are complying. So now this was by 2020, a total of 700 policies and implementation activities were reported, which is great. The 10-year framework of programs on sustainable consumption and production. So this is under the 10-year framework. This was from all U.S. From all ratified by and agreed upon, policies and implemented by 93 countries in the European Union. So this is, in summary, what entails Sustainable Development Goal number 12. We'll go into a little bit more detail about some of these facets in the next segment of this video. So in this part of the video for Sustainable Development Goal number 12, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly put some facts on these targets that I went over. Sometimes just going over targets doesn't bring to life what needs to be achieved, even though I did give you some infographic facts. I'm going to provide you with a little bit more detail. This segment, if you feel comfortable with 12, then you don't necessarily need to listen to the rest of this, but this can provide you with more of a foundation on this. The global economy is driven by worldwide consumption and production. Now, there's various ways when we deal with this, the globe from a public health perspective, we're thinking about health, but when we're thinking about even education, we're thinking about consumption of information and production of information. So this is a nice way to kind of model a framework to think about things. So each year, 1/3 of all food is produced, that is produced ends up rotting in the bins of consumers, retailers, spoiling due to poor transportation, harvesting practices. So sometimes by the time it gets to the shelves, it's already destroyed. And so fresh produce, a lot of times, then you have contamination, and then there's a lot of recall. So this is the kind of delicate sort of balance between consumption and production. So then you have kind of, so if you think about 1.3 billion tons worth of food, which is $1 trillion worth of food that's waste. So this is something, and there's starvation in the world. So this is a staggering imbalance. If people worldwide then switch to energy efficient light bulbs, the world would save $120 billion. So these are important ways that we can be saving money as a globe. Should the global population reach 10 billion or 9.6 billion by 2050, which it is predicted to hit, the equivalent of almost 3 planets could be required to provide the natural resources needed to sustain current lifestyle. So we have to start making cutbacks. We have to decreasing the amount of time that the light is on. There was a global blackout where people all around the world, in awareness, decided to turn off the lights, and I had a video that I created for that. Sustainable consumption and production is about doing more and better with less. It is also about decoupling economic growth from economic environmental degradation. Economic growth from environmental degradation. The current crisis with the COVID-19 response, and it's still ongoing, there is a systemic shift to a more sustainable economy. And so this is a time of great change and an important time for us to be rethinking some of these things, and reframing and shifting, so that we can be not only more inclusive but have sustainable cities, and bring into some more of balance, consumption, and production. So if you're thinking about 93% of the world's 250 largest companies are now operating and reporting on sustainability. So it just if we look at it by resource and break it down, then 2 billion people live in countries experiencing high water stress. That's a lot of people. Less than 3% of the world's water is fresh. So, like I said, about 70% of the world is water, but only 3% you can actually drink. And the numbers are actually even worse because 2.5% of that, 2.5% is frozen. So really, humanity has 0.5% of water to rely on. And so, we're doing, unfortunately, we're polluting waters, rivers, lakes, nature. And so 1 billion people do not have access to fresh water. So excessive use of water contributes to global water stress. And then, that's not to include the floods that occur, which accounts for 43% of natural disasters. And if it affects 2.3 billion people, so any sort of calamity, disaster, affects a lot of people, and the lack of resources also affects people. So if people worldwide switch to energy efficient light bulbs, I said this earlier, we're going to save $120 billion. But also the fact that households consume about roughly 30% of global energy and consequently contribute to 21% of resultant carbon dioxide emissions. So these are, again, emissions that need to be limited, greenhouse gas emissions that need to be limited. So just thinking about motor vehicles, and 32% increase in vehicle ownership has occurred by 2020. So motor vehicle kilometers have increased by 40%. So all of these are using up energy. And then, of course, thinking about consumption and production of food, and land degradation that is taking place. Soil fertility is declining. Water use is becoming unsustainable, overfishing, marine environment degradation, and that affects the ability to use natural resources, and food supply, especially from water, like fishing, but also land. So this is all affecting all of us. And so 38 million children under the age of 5 were overweight or obese in 2019. So childhood obesity is something that is increasing and on the rise and really needs to be addressed early on. And so overnutrition and undernutrition continues to be a problem in both low income countries, low middle income countries, but also I would argue, and it still remains an issue in high income countries. So production and consumption. This is the theme for Sustainable Development Goal number 12. And these are the areas that we need to be focusing on for a better future, for a better 2030. Thank you for listening.